Hey guys, Chris here. Tonight we have our Halloween Spooktacular, and we have two stories for you. When you go into the wild and you experience something extremely frightening and you realize it does not want you there, there's a reason for it. That's next. All right, guys, we are in the studio tonight. We have two stories. Like I said, they're both very frightening. We're going to be opening the beer on the second story so we can get right into it. And with us tonight, we have my skeleton cousin, Daryl, and my other skeleton cousin, Daryl Jr. back here. Say howdy, boys. They's a little quiet because they've been jawing a lot. All right, let's get into that first story. Okay, you guys, our first story takes place near Boole, Minnesota. No Halloween pun intended. Now, Boole, Minnesota is in the northern part of the state, St. Louis County. There's a lot of lakes up there, forests, creeks, and bogs and swamps. And this is where Andrew liked to go hunting. This particular year, 2014, October of that year, 10 years ago to this month, he was going to go out there on a scouting trip just to get ready for the upcoming hunting season. Now, he'd been to this area many times before, very familiar with it, but there was this portion of this wildlife management area where this swamp was located, and he liked to deer hunt, that he always had this feeling of the creeps. And he'd never had that feeling anywhere else in the state, anywhere else in the outdoors. It was just this one area. And he had this feeling of being watched and like his presence was not welcome there. But that didn't stop Andrew. So on October 24th, 2014, he drove to Boole, drove south of there, past the cemetery, interesting, into the wildlife management area, WMA. Goes on a dirt road, parks his truck, gets out, and is getting ready to do a scouting trip on a route that he knows. Follows the dirt road and then finds his path, goes between a couple of swamps, thick forest, and he's heading for and gets to this abandoned railroad bed. I don't believe there's any tracks on it anymore. I looked on Google Earth and I could see there was no tracks. And these railroad beds are raised up and level, and they're really straight. And so he could get on this railroad bed and then head south and just get a real clear picture of the whole area and way to the south of him and to the north of him. So he's heading down south on this railroad bed. And he passes between these two large swamps, cedar swamps. And these cedar swamps are very thick, they're very dense. And you can see some of the water, but you can't see all the way across them like a pond or something. And sure enough, he gets this creepy feeling as he's walking through there. And he's always had this strange feeling in this one area. Continues south, feeling kind of passes. He goes about a mile further. There's a railroad trestle over this boggy creek. Passes that, and he turns around and he heads back up, heading north now on this railroad road. I'll just call it a road. He gets to a point where off to the west of him, he hears this loud vocalization kind of off in the distance, this howl scream. Very unnerving. And he's out there by himself. It's early morning. And he's walking. And he stops. It starts up again. This howl scream vocalization. But what's strange is it seems to get a little bit closer. And there's this pattern where when he walks, he doesn't hear it, and whenever he stops, he hears it. And it repeated this pattern of whenever he stopped, he could hear it, but now he could hear it closer, and whenever he stopped and he heard it, it was like parallel with him. Like it was moving with him north on the tracks. It was following him. And the thought of this thing doing this, it was almost like, whenever you stop, I'm going to let you know you need to keep moving. That was like the impression he got. Like it didn't want him there. Continues going north, not wanting to stop anymore. He looks up ahead and he sees on this railroad bed this dark shape. Kind of low to the tracks, it's kind of a shape. And he guessed, is that a bear? That could probably be a bear. It looked to be a long ways off, maybe a half mile away. Like I said, these tracks are perfectly straight going through this swamp and the forest. And he continued walking. He stopped again and he heard the scream one more time. Kept going, and he got within about 85 yards of this shape. And he stood there, still hearing the screaming behind him, and this shape now stood upright, staring right at Andrew. Almost like a face-off. And he sees how large this thing is. And then it takes one large stride off of the railroad bed down into the ditch. One more stride up the other side of the ditch into this tall grass, about 3.5 feet, maybe 4 feet tall. Still towering above that, at least 4 feet above this grass. Because he saw this profile, he could see that this thing was lean and muscular, dark black all over. The face was even black. It had this conical head and these long, swinging arms. Appeared to be about 7 feet tall. Just staring at him in this tall grass now, with the swamp just to the left of this thing. Here's another scream behind him. Looks, doesn't see anything. He looks back at this thing. This thing now just looked over its shoulder, its right shoulder, and it was looking up the railroad bed, the road. And then Andrew looked up where this creature was looking, and he saw behind the creature on this road what he thought was this dark, small pine tree right in the middle of the railroad bed. Maybe 50, 75 feet. And he looked at that and it wasn't moving. He was like, that's really weird. There's like a tree right in the middle. And then this creature was standing there swaying back and forth, keeping an eye on Andrew, and then it would quickly make 2 steps to its left, closer to the swamp. These really quick movements, like jarring movements. And like it was sidestepping. And then it looked up the railroad bed again at this shape. Meanwhile, this thing's screaming again, and this whole thing went on for about a minute. And Andrew was like in between this activity. His heart was beating. His breath was really short. He was really terrified. And then this thing takes one last quick glance, stares right at Andrew, and then disappears into the forest. Just this big stride and disappeared into the forest. You could hear it a few steps into the brush, then it was quiet. The sound behind him stopped. You couldn't hear this screaming, howling anymore. And his hair was on end still, just with all this going on. And then he looks up this railroad bed, and the tree that he thought was there is now gone. Or what he thought was a tree is now gone. He looks around, doesn't hear anything, doesn't see anything, continues heading north because he has to break off at a certain point. Truck, and that was the only way to get there, so he had to continue. Unfortunately, everything calmed down. He got off the railroad bed, went through the path, got in the dirt road, followed it back to his truck, and went home. Andrew got home, and he was just beside himself. He was anxious, he was distressed, he was thinking about all that had happened that day. He saw this thing, it was upright, it was on 2 feet, it was definitely not a bear. And the realization was that I saw a Bigfoot today. It was just hard for him to say that he had seen a Sasquatch in his favorite hunting area. He was having a hard time just walking away, not going back, and he felt compelled, and he wanted to get a better understanding about what had happened, so he decided to go back the next day. He had a hard time sleeping that night, but he got up October 24th, 2014, and he went back. Parked his truck in the same spot, followed the same route out, got in the railroad tracks, and went down where the swamps are on either side of the railroad bed. He looked up where this small, dark tree had been the day earlier. There was nothing there. And he thought about it, and he said, most likely that was a juvenile Bigfoot that was standing there. And this large Bigfoot that was confronting him was most likely protecting it, intercepting Andrew, and trying to deal with the situation based on what Andrew was going to do. And he said this, he said, I felt like I was too close and should back off. But he knew that he felt pressure to keep moving down this railroad bed to get out of there, and this thing was in this way, and so it just created this situation for everybody. And Andrew, he remembered this thing felt really anxious and distressed like he was, and he realized that's what it was doing. It was protecting its young. Interesting, while he's surveying the situation and all these thoughts were going through his mind, he looked and he did not find any tracks. They said the ground was really hard, a lot of grass and off the bed, and then the swamp obviously. And he heard off in the distance to the west of him, to his right, he heard 3 loud tree knocks. Very loud, but they were pretty far away. And he felt those tree knocks, and they were just these steady, something hitting a hard log or stick against a tree, and he felt this sound. It had to be a warning for him to not come back. And so he left. I don't know if he ever hunted there ever again. And that is our story from the swamps of northern Minnesota. Tonight we have our Halloween Spooktacular, and we have 2 stories for you. When you go into the wild and you experience something extremely frightening and you realize it does not want you there, there's a reason for it. That's next. All right, you guys, we have a special guest who's a Hollywood icon, has starred in multiple Halloween movies, all the way from Haddonfield, Illinois. It's Michael Myers. Let's give him a big hand. All right, Michael, welcome to the show. I hear you're in town with some time to kill. So, do you like stories about Bigfoot? They're pretty frightening, the stories, the Bigfoot. I think you could relate to them. Yeah? I'll take that as a yes. Yeah, he's quite the cut-up, isn't he? Oh my God. All right. Oh, is this yours? Is that yours, Michael? What the heck? No, we're not going to give that to him. That's not a good idea. How about some candy here? Where'd the candy go? Here we go. We have some candy for Michael. It's the candy jewelry. That's for you, pal. That's for you. All right, we're going to crack the beer now. And he's a weird guy. All right, we got Nightmare Fuel. Speaking of weird guys, check this one out. This is Nightmare Fuel West Coast IPA. We got a Freddy Krueger going on here. This is from the Mason Ale Works, 16 ounces, and I believe that's a 7.1 on the ABV, and it says, "Don't you dare fall asleep." So there you go. Oh, a little bit of suds coming out. Wow, that is definitely got an IPA, hoppy taste to it. There we go. I'm gonna go right out of the can though. That is a really cool can. Nightmare Fuel. Look at that. Creepy. Wow, I'd offer you some, but I hear you're driving the station wagon tonight, so. Yeah, that's a good beer. IPA, real smooth finish, but it's kind of bitter at the same time, but I like it. It's a strong beer. Yeah, Mason Ale Works, Nightmare Fuel. Cheers. So the day was getting late. It's time for dinner. Kids came back to camp. Everybody had dinner, had a nice time, got the campfire going, hung out, had s'mores, enjoying each other's company, and they were done. Now, their sleep setup was the kids stayed in the tent about 20 feet from the fire pit. It was just a good-sized tent. Mark, his brother, and the 2 cousins. And then behind that was the Scout International 2, and that's where the mom and dad were going to sleep inside the Scout. And then next to that was where the uncle was going to stay in the back of the pickup truck with no camper on. He was just going to sleep right under the stars and right in the back of the truck. So everyone said goodnight. They're all in their sleep positions. And about 1 a.m., Mark hears something walking around his tent. It woke him up. And he said, whatever it was, whoever it was, sounded really big. You could hear these feet and these footsteps and this heavy breathing. And because of this, his brother was laying next to him, woke up as well. And they could barely see each other in the dark, and they're both staring at each other and they're listening to this. And this thing walked around their tent several times. Mark said he was really confused and he was terrified. Had no idea what it was. And then, just like that, this thing, one more lap, and it faded off. You could hear them walking away. And they were relieved. And they just laid there thinking this thing's going to come back. They didn't know what was going to happen next. Now, Mark would not realize what happened to everyone else until the next morning. And this is what happened. The mom and dad are sleeping in the Scout. Their feet facing towards the back door. It swung open. And something either pushed or lifted the Scout up on two wheels, and then dropped it. And it bounced like that. Woke them both up, totally frightened. And the dad had a handgun and he couldn't find it. He was searching all over, and because it went up like this on two wheels and dropped back down, it possibly fell between a seat or something. He had no idea. But while he was searching for that, the mom slowly sat up and she looked out the window and she saw this large silhouette, this large shape of a human-like shape with these large shoulders, walking away from the vehicle and walking through their campsite and heading for the trees. And she said it kind of glided and it was very smooth and it was dark and very large. The next part of this is the uncle, sleeping in the back of the truck, he heard this commotion and he sat up in the pickup truck and he saw this large shape that the mom had just seen that was heading for the trees. He saw this and he thought and assumed this was Mark's dad going out to do a late night bathroom break, going to take a pee. And so he gets out of the truck, steps on the bumper, steps down, and he starts following this thing, thinking it's Mark's dad. Now, Mark's dad is 6'2", 250 pounds, and very muscular. And the uncle, totally assuming this is Mark's dad, follows this thing into the woods. This thing goes around some trees, into this small clearing, and he sees this large shape walking away from him in the moonlight. And then he realizes, after he gets close enough, that this can't be Mark's dad because it's too huge, it's too large. And so he stops and he's looking around, and you can see the dark trees and the kind of the clear meadow with the moonlight in it, and this large shape slowly working its way through this meadow. And he has this chill come over him. But his curiosity causes him to go a little further and follow it a little further behind this tree cover, and he looks around and he can see this large shape walking through the meadow, and then it disappears into the next stand of trees. Very chilling. He turns around, goes back to the camp, doesn't wake anybody up because I don't know if he assumed nobody else saw it and he didn't want to, roust everybody out of bed. And so he got back in the pickup truck and went back to sleep, or I don't know if he slept, but he went in the pickup truck. The next morning, Mark woke up and he could hear from the tent the rest of the family, the uncle, the mom and dad, talking. They're talking kind of excitedly about something. Unzips the tent, and he gets out, and his brother comes behind him, and he can hear they're talking about something that happened last night, and they were explaining their stories. The mom and dad talked about the truck being lifted up. Uncle talked about following this large shape, thinking it's the dad. And then Mark said, well, my brother, their son, heard this thing walking around the tent. And so they all had this experience from different perspectives. While they were talking, they all agreed that whatever this was, and they finally concluded it was a Bigfoot, it did not want them there. And they thought it was best to leave. So they packed up, got everything loaded up, and they left, and they never came back. That's what Mark said. He said he was really grateful that I read his story, and we talked a little bit about it, and he said he hasn't told many people about this, so leave him a good comment below. I would really appreciate that. But this is something that is always stuck in his memory as a 10-year-old boy, and it's like it happened 2 weeks ago. It's very fresh in his memory, and it's something he will never forget. And that is our story from Mark. Did you like that? He's listening very patiently and quietly back here. So he is a big guy. Oh my gosh, look at this. Here's me. This is a little spooky, but he's been behaving, so I really appreciate that. Thank you, Michael. You know what's funny is I actually dress up in this costume when the kids come on Halloween night, and I scare some of the parents in the front yard stuff. You know, you act like a dummy or whatever. And the kids are so cute though. They go, "Thank you, Michael Myers," after I give them the candy. You know, it's pretty funny. And I got the music playing from the Halloween, and I got some other things out there about like posters and stuff on the side of the house. And anyways, all right, you guys, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the comments, appreciate you guys following me, and we got a lot more coming, and we will see you on the next one. Hope you have a happy Halloween and keep hiking. Oh my gosh, Michael is missing. All right, he's probably not that way. He's probably in there. I do not want to go in there. Yikes. All right, I'm gonna start in here. I bet you he's under the bed. Nope, it's not there. I thought I heard the neighbor's dog bark. Let's go see.